Shalom, welcome to another episode of Inspiration from Zion. I'm Jonathan Feldstein, and I have the privilege of being your host, coming to you from the Judean Mountains here in Israel. I like to refer to it as the original Bible Belt. Inspiration from Zion is a program of the Genesis 123 Foundation, whose mission is to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. I pray that you will find this all of those. Through this conversation, we're excited to bring you topics and stories relating to Israel that you might not hear about anywhere else. We want this to be interactive, so please be in touch with us at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com and send along any questions and any comments about any topic anytime. Or you can follow Inspiration from Zion on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Stay tuned until the end, where we always have an important announcement, and feel free to share this with others who will also find it of interest live and certainly in recording. Today, I am super excited for a very, very, very long overdue conversation. And that overdueness, if that's a proper word, is due to our respective travel schedules and just generally how busy our guest is. So I'm glad that we're having this time, and I'm really grateful. Emily Nielsen Winkler. I'm reading the bio that we have because I don't want to do it wrong. She's important, and this is an important conversation. Emily is the founder and CEO of Valip Group, an intelligence services network operating across Israel, the United States, and around the world. She focuses on exposing and dismantling extremist organizations, helping governments and corporations identify hostile networks, particularly extremist and Islamist influence groups, including the Red Green Alliance, in order to counter their harmful impact and support intelligence-led decision making. Valip's help and help Valip helps leaders and institutions understand the complex threat networks and translate their research into action. Rather than approaching intelligence as a purely technological product, her work is an extended intelligence desk combining human analysis, structured research, technology, legal discipline, and operational strategy to deliver usable intelligence. Emily, there's a lot we can talk about, but you and I, the last kind of candid conversation we had was this last January, and I suppose that that's probably a really important place for us to start because I meant to go back to our original email trails when we were introduced 2 or 3 years ago by our mutual friend Olga Meshwe Washington. Unfortunately, you and I have become good friends as a consequence of her death a year ago this past January. And I was honored to be able to work with you in honoring her and making sure that she had the proper burial here in Israel with a recognition of how tremendous she was. And I still think that there's nothing that any of us can do to properly fill her shoes, but I typically wait for the announcement at the end that this is an episode in memory or honor of a loved one. This episode, as many things that I do, is in honor of Olga's memory and her lasting legacy. And I'm grateful that you and I are now connected as part of that, and that this conversation will continue to propel something that was so important to her as your friend and partner. So I'm just grateful that you're here and honored. While I would rather Olga be alongside you, I'm sure that she's sitting on your shoulder, guiding you in any number of ways that we will see and not see. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Well, that's amazing. And thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It is very long overdue. And so I'm very excited to be on tonight. And I think that so much of what the company does today is still in honor of Olga and her memory. We talk about her almost every day in every meeting we have. A huge amount of what we're going to talk about tonight was a lot of inspiration from her. And she was a huge advocate for raising this type of awareness of what dangers we actually do face around the world. And of course, directly out of Israel.
So I wanna start with some bigger, wide lens things to focus on. And first, I read the bio, and I don't think that that does sufficiently in terms of acknowledging how great you are. And I don't say that in a in any way that's inappropriate. I just think you are, and the things that you're doing, and with the passion and commitment and the professionalism. I mean, that blows me away. But tell us a minute beyond the bio, a little bit about yourself. You mentioned before we started recording something about your mother recently saying that you were always fighting for social justice since you were 6. You and Valip Group, and how are the two connected in terms of what you're doing now?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to. So I've, like many, have had the fortunate opportunity of living in two great nations. I was born and raised in the United States, predominantly in Tennessee, and moved to Israel when I was a teenager. So I've been in Israel ever since. I'm joining you tonight. I said that people are responding to where they're joining from. I'm joining you from Tel Aviv. And my life has kind of, gone along the guidelines of this dual citizenship of American Israeli. But beyond that, also someone who did grow up in what's considered today the Bible Belt. I agree with your assessment, Jonathan. You're in the real Bible Belt, but the first one. But growing up in the Bible Belt and then moving to the Jewish state, the only one that we have. And in my personal experience that really led me to the career path that I'm on today was in viewing that reality through the lenses of the people that were around in my community. Viewing what it was to be Jewish in an area with not a lot of Jews, and then experiencing various levels of what I would define as institutional anti-Semitism in the southern United States. And then moving in 2003 during the Second Intifada to a nation that was facing its own very difficult challenges and experiencing what institutional anti-Semitism is on a genocidal attempted approach.
Yes.
So that kind of, most likely, if I look backwards, I kind of feel like that probably set my trajectory for my career. But what really solidified it is afterwards, of course, my military service. As every Israeli, I was gifted to be selected in an intelligence unit. And from there, I realized that my mission in life has always really been to seek to, one, bridge the gap of awareness around the world of what anti-Semitism is and what happens when we ignore it. I don't want to be as cliche as to say to uphold the promise never again, but it really does kind of come down to that if we're going to make that promise, we have to act on it. And it starts by recognizing it before it escalates to something that comes out of control that we can't handle. And secondly, to be able to do that not only as the Jewish community, but as the Judeo-Christian value system that we're trying to protect with Jews and Christians together, which is, of course, how you know that Olga and I operated together for many, many years under this mission. She is an absolute huge loss to our mission, and all we can do is to try to keep up in her footsteps, but like you said, almost impossible.
Yeah.
And I do hope that we do it justice. Many, many years ago when we decided to name the company Valop, it's essentially a combination of valor operations. And it really does come from the idea and the concept of acting in valor, of being courageous, being respectful of the mission, and brave enough to kind of take the next steps, even when, one, you may not see what you're walking into, and two, the world may not understand what you're trying to do. So there's a lot of inspiration that's been drawn from those that are close to the company, and I know that some of them may be joining tonight. And I'll say just thank you to everyone that's ever supported us along the past 15 years of operations. Without all of you, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today, and I have no doubt that we'll not be able to continue in the future if we didn't have all the friends that we do.
Indeed. Yeah, thank you. We're going to speak a lot about the topic is exposing the Muslim Brotherhood in your backyard. And by the way, I have to acknowledge while we're speaking specifically about the US, you operate all over the world, as unfortunately does the Muslim Brotherhood. And there are people here who are joining from just at a glance to see who's here, who I recognize, at least 3, maybe 4 continents. And I don't know how many countries between those continents. So there's a lot of international interest. But before we even talk about what you're doing to expose the Muslim Brotherhood, can you give a little bit of background about what it is? Why is this thing worth exposing and so such a threat to all of us?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to know that there's people from all over. We will focus on the US, and I can give some specific use cases. But it's really important. The first thing you need to know about the Muslim Brotherhood is that it is a global threat because it is a global entity. People really don't quite grasp how large the Muslim Brotherhood is, but they don't view borders the same way that we do, and nor do they respect borders the same way that we might. And so when they look at sovereign nations, that's not a legitimate function in their policy. And so the Muslim Brotherhood really first and foremost is a global movement of scholars, which is probably the misconception number 2 of most people. They view the Muslim Brotherhood to potentially as be radical terrorist type thing when you think about it. But the core of their function is actually they're scholars. Most of them have PhDs, advanced degrees, postdoctorates. If in their own words, they're 300,000 scholars strong across the globe.
Wow.
It's a pretty big group.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we do span across the globe in what we do. Our expertise, as Jonathan mentioned, is exposing and dismantling extremist organizations. My personal expertise is the Muslim Brotherhood and the Red Green Alliance. So obviously we engage a lot in this. We have helped advise various governments around the world on the threat that this organization poses and their ultimate agenda, which they're not shy about. And we're going to talk about some of their own documents and wording.
Sure.
But essentially, we're talking about an organization that has, in their minds, a very justified mission. And that is that after the fall of the last Islamic Caliphate, the Ottoman Empire essentially, that shame is essentially too large and that there needs to be a reconstruction of what will potentially be, or could be, unless we prevent it, a third Islamic Caliphate that they believe should be run under their ideology, which obviously attains to various types of Sharia law, you could say. Some things that they've adapted throughout time. But in essence, what does it mean for all of us? It means a reality that we've already fought twice before. And it means having to deal with a governing system that does not suit our value system and has no room for our value systems. And we all kind of know throughout history what happens when a group like that takes over. And I would love to say that they haven't been successful, but if you do zoom out for a moment before we dive into the United States, if you do zoom out, the Muslim Brotherhood alliances around the world, specifically together with the red-green sides of these alliances, and so the Islamist and the Marxist side, they've had great successes around the world. And I'm hoping that our great nations won't fall to that.
Yeah, very much. Now, before we go into some of this, there's a proclivity in the West to banter around a word, to shame people from doing what you do by calling you or me Islamophobic. What's the difference between the Muslim Brotherhood as an international entity versus average run-of-the-mill Muslims, of which there are, 2 billion in the world?
It's a really easy distinction in my professional opinion. Essentially what we're talking about is there's Muslims and there's Islamists. And I think that it needs to be more first, that's the first point of awareness, is that to understand that there's a difference between Muslims and Islamists. Muslim is abiders of a specific religion called Islam. Islamists they're abiding by a specific political ideology that has a goal to essentially replace governing systems with their own. And so those are two very different things in my professional opinion in general. So regarding the claim of Islamophobia, it is an age-old act of the Muslim Brotherhood and its factions to blame people of being Islamophobic, just to utilize cancel culture or character assassination. I think that people need to realize that claim doesn't stand up. We're not talking about Muslims, we're talking about Islamists.
Well, I say that I'm an Islamophobe proudly because I'm afraid of Islam. And that's what Islamophobia technically means. They've just branded it into something that makes me a racist or makes me discriminatory. But if I think of all of the people who practice a religion and you do so in an extremist way around the world, I'm not embarrassed to say that I'm an Islamophobe. It's just, nor should anyone be. That doesn't mean that we need to discriminate against Muslims, but we do need to have more Emilys doing the job that you're doing.
I understand completely what you're saying. And I wish that, that practical base would be the jumping point from any discussion with these types of people. I think that they have set up their propaganda arms so well that almost any rebuttal that we have to it, they still scream and shout and try to discredit you. But I think that the clock is ticking on that for them. I think that the world is starting to get a little bit tired of why do you guys just jump to Islamophobia? Why are you scared of in engaging in this conversation? Why can't you stand and debate this topic? I think in general, the world is a little bit tired of seeing people call victim before anything's actually put down on the table.
That's a good one. Okay. So what's the threat, Emily? We're going to talk specifically about the US. I do want to encourage anyone, of course, to use the Q&A and ask questions, especially if you're from other countries and want to dig down a little bit deeper. But what are the threats? And then we'll jump into what you and Valip are doing.
Sure. So if I put this almost like on a call today with a client, I said, do you want the Hollywood version or the Intel version? And I'm going to decide to go on the Hollywood version here.
Oh.
And so I'll start with the theatrical, right? What's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is that slowly, piece by piece, bit by bit, our countries essentially fall to the will of the Muslim Brotherhood. And very quickly, we would find that they've taken over government functions, executive bodies, agencies, and our space is kind of a little bit limited in what we could do. And eventually that kind of turns into us living under Sharia law, Islamic law, and living as either second-class citizens, number one. Two, as a second-class citizen, paying a tax that they demand that we pay. If we don't want to pay that tax, that's fine. You have the option of converting. If that's an option for you on the table, you'll save that money. If you don't want to pay the tax and you don't want to convert, your third option is leave. So leave the homeland that you know, which probably is not the homeland that you grew up in anymore. Or the last one, which used to be the ancient one, is face your fate. Now, this is what the four general rules of an Islamic caliphate and what essentially for a future Islamic caliphate would implement. Now, a lot of people will say to me, that's absolutely impossible. That's not going to happen. Now, I can guarantee anyone on this call, if you could go back in time to 1978 and sit in front of the Iranians and ask them the same thing, if they would laugh at you and kind of walk away, or 2 years later after their regime fell and they've lived under this Islamic regime for so long now, if how they feel about that today. And that's only one example that I could give of multiple countries. So I might say it in kind of a Hollywood way because it's hard for us as Westerners to even comprehend that something like that is possible. But I want to take, and this is where I'm going to start going into intelligence, right? Because this is where my role is in this mission. I don't want people to look at this in a Hollywood version. I want them to look at the facts on the ground. I want them to say, wait a second, well, what did happen in Iran in the 70s? How did that come to play? What was the role of the Muslim Brotherhood in any of it? What happened in Sudan? How did Sudan, an African country, become one of the most prominent Muslim Brotherhood-led countries in the world? What happened in Egypt, that they've been kicked out 3 times, and now they're considered a terrorist organization? What happened in Jordan, that not only are they considered a terrorist organization today, but it's the only terrorist organization on the list that the government is going after retroactively in their assets?
What does that mean, retroactively?
Most countries will give you kind of like a pass. You're a terrorist organization from today forward. From before, no one was aware. You get a pass. That's not the case. The Jordanian government is going after the infrastructure of the Muslim Brotherhood with everything they have. How is it possible that Saudi Arabia and the UAE probably has the most prominent case against the Muslim Brotherhood in the world? Most recently, they actually requested or said that they would not grant scholarships anymore to their students to arrive in the UK because it was too radicalized by Muslim Brotherhood ideology. So I want to take a zoom out for a second. And the intel on the ground, the information actually is the threat of the Muslim Brotherhood's ideology and infrastructure that enables them to take over nation states as we know them today is so daunting and strong that the most prominent Arab nations in the Middle East have outlawed them very strictly. So this is not happening within our borders. They've kicked them out. And now, where do they go when they get kicked out? Here's our conversation today. The Muslim Brotherhood is one of the biggest exports of the Middle East into Western nations. And that's now a threat that we all face today.
That's terribly scary. What can you point to? We could probably spend hours just going into this because you do this, right? Your intelligence briefings on a whole depth of things. But what are the top? I don't know. We're not David Letterman. We don't have to have a top 10 list, but the top 3 or 4 things that average Americans, people. A lot of the questions before we started this conversation were, how do I track it in my own backyard? Literally, how do I know where their influence is. So what do average Americans or people in the West need to know and look at in terms of where's the influence? Somebody asked specifically already a question about how many such scholars are present in the US, and are they concentrated in any one particular area?
Oh, that's a big question. You're right. We could do a lot on that. Let me
Right.
think about how I can answer that shortly in a podcast for you. So, so maybe I'll show it to you and
Okay.
and the viewers here
Okay.
tonight. Let me see. Maybe that's a better way of doing this. So, how do you find them? One, they're not hiding. Fortunately and unfortunately, they're not hiding. They're very proud of their mission. They do believe that through what we would call proselytizing, they'll be able to essentially convince the masses, especially those that are more in need, to join them. Okay, and so first and foremost, I would say the first sign that you need to be aware of is their recruitment. Okay, if you are aware in your own backyard, wherever you all are in the world at the moment, that there's pretty heavy efforts and attempts to convert young people to get them to join clubs in universities. If anyone joining from the U.S. and the United Kingdom tonight, it's rampant in your countries from kindergarten to 12th grade. All of a sudden, you start seeing kind of material come up that is more Islamist in nature. Okay, like I said, and not even just Muslim, Islamist in nature, really teaching that if you don't abide by Islam, you're sinning. You're essentially, the whole form of proselytizing is essentially to try to convince them to come over to their ideology and their beliefs. And so if you start seeing this happening within the youth, and you start seeing, you're walking around town and a little bit more people than usual are looking more radicalized, okay, by their dress, by their form. I will see way more women covered head to toe in London than I do anywhere in the Middle East that I travel, practically, unless it's a nation that's already taken over by Islamists.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of this undertone, and I don't mean to say you guys should all go out and go profiling. It's not what I mean. But organizations like mine or others, we've done ample research and publications on the differences and what to look for. Okay, the types of dress that they wear that indicate that they're considered Islamist and not just Muslim. There's all these types of nuances that you could look for, and so recruitment's definitely one. A second one is probably what you already touched on, Jonathan, is the claim of Islamophobia. The more rampant that claim becomes in your immediate surroundings, more of an indication that there's people there that are trying to hide something, trying to hide their specific agenda. And if you follow U.S. politics, the U.S. kind of slowly in different large municipalities, you'll see that politicians are becoming a little bit more nervous to say anything. Social leaders are anxious. They're like, okay, we don't want to disrespect. We don't know what to say because we're going to get lashed. We're going to get blamed. So when those accusations come into play, that means that you already definitely have them on the ground. Okay, but if I take you into their psyche for a moment, okay. Their psyche is we need to start. We need to have a starting point, and we need to grow. And so those two elements that I just mentioned are indications that they're already growing. I would claim, Jonathan, that that's already a little too late.
Yeah.
And once they're already down. So with your permission, I would actually even like to kind of take that question and morph it a little bit to say, what can we identify that can prevent us from getting to that point?
Okay.
Because once they feel very comfortable, then it's very difficult to stop this process. So to be able to do this, we created something many years ago that we call the 6 steps of escalation. Okay, so the 6 steps of escalation of any radicalized network, including the Moslem Brotherhood, starts with step number 1, and that's educational indoctrination. It's a really fancy way of saying brainwashing. Essentially, they start in the education system. Every single place that they've ever gone to, including their own, including when they were created in Egypt in the 1920s, they started with education inside of the schooling system, inside of universities. From there, they go up to step number 2, organized mobilization. Again, just a fancy term. It means being able to mobilize protests and chaos in the street. Okay. The U.S. has experienced plenty of this over the last couple of years, everything from the encampments on universities to protests in the street on all sorts of different topics. Some of them have gotten violent, but essentially those first 2 steps, education, organized mobilization, those are your first 2 biggest indicators that you have a problem coming to your city. because those are only the first two steps. Above that, you now get into the third step, which is essentially legalized harassment. And I guarantee that anyone that knows anything about this is nodding their head just like Jonathan is right now, because that is the real problem today in the United States and in most countries around the world.
And
We
to
are
me, in my
already.
head, I'm nodding because that's so insidious. Not that the rest
Mhm.
of it isn't it, but that's already where I'm feeling uncomfortable. My wife and children are feeling uncomfortable.
Yes, and that is the goal, right? And so, why do we call it legalized harassment? Because it's pretty much they'll push every line possible to stay within the law or just pass the law, that it's
Yeah.
not enough that you're going to take them to court or you're going to take an action against them. And so, they know kind of where the soft spot is for that. And so, our expertise as a company is essentially working on those three steps. We work to identify these networks before they escalate beyond that. Because beyond step number 3 is what I like to call the point of difficult return. Beyond legalized harassment, now you're in crime. The fourth step is criminal activity. What's going on right now with the Jewish community in the UK and attacks? Those are not lone wolf attacks. Those are not, people who think that they're not connected to wider networks. No, those are intended, orchestrated crimes against communities out of this hate-based ideology. It's intended to intimidate you. It's intended to make you want to move. It worked very well in France. The amount of French Jews that have left France and come to Israel, I mean, it's for them, that's a victory. It's kind of a cliche, right? Because Israel would say, hey, that's a victory for us too. We also want the French to come.
Right.
Who would have thought that we have a win-win situation in this fight? But beyond step number 4, you're now in dangerous territory, because 5 really is murder, terrorism, and 6 is their ultimate goal, capture.
Capture of the
Essentially,
whole society.
capture of
Right. So
society.
Jews leaving is just an advanced symptom of what their ultimate goal is. And like many things, Jews are the canary in the coal mine, but Jews leaving doesn't stop. It's not about the Jews. It's about ultimately capture the whole society.
I think that Olga actually said this the best one year when her and I were speaking together on stage.
Yeah.
She went off on one of those amazing charismatic rants that she used to do. And she said, do you not see, we were speaking to a Christian crowd. She said, do you not see that once the Jews have left, it's already too late for us? Yeah. And it really hit me hard because obviously, as a Jewish woman and Olga as a Christian woman, I could see the pain in her eyes and the fear in her eyes that if countries don't understand that one of the gifts that the Jewish people actually have given the world in an odd sense is that we are the indicator. The anti-Semitism starts, and it's your gift. It's a gift that the Jewish people have essentially been forced to give the world. When they come for us, you need to start fighting, not after they're done with us. Because once they've done their little pilot on us and we've left, there really is nothing standing in their way between them and you. And Olga understood that very well. And I do believe that the Christian world today is very much waking up to this issue. I think that in the US, we're starting to see it on Christian campuses, which is starting to become very scary for a lot of the Christian community. They never believed that it would arrive on campus. That was a Columbia and a Harvard and a Yale and a Princeton and a Berkeley thing. No, sir. No, this was orchestrated this way. And that's actually maybe a point of departure of maybe I could show you guys some interesting pieces. So we're talking about the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. What does that actually look like? And so I'm going to share my screen, and I'm actually going to share with you a type of mapping, intelligence mapping, that we would share with decision makers or policy makers, or in general, anyone that would like to know on how did this happen. And so I'm going to show you, and I'll zoom in and out of this little map for you here. This is actually a timeline of some of the Muslim Brotherhood activity between Egypt, the United States, and Israel from, like I said, the early 1920s forward to today to 2026. So if I zoom out here, we're not going to go over all of these details, but as you can see, the Egyptian line has all sorts of points that have happened. Okay, Nasser's crackdown, one of the first times that they were ejected from Egypt. Mubarak's crackdown on them, and the second time that they were expelled from Egypt. And then later on, of course, for the first time when the Freedom and Justice Party, which is the political party of the Muslim Brotherhood, took power, and then essentially when they lost and left. Now, all of that happened in Egypt, but what happened when they were kicked out of Egypt the first time?
Right.
And so for that, we visualize all of this information, and everything the company deals with is open source intelligence. I'm not some sort of a secret agency, right? I didn't get this information from nowhere. This is essentially It's all sorts of information that we find online. Okay, these ones are connected to these ones. This is a Muslim Brotherhood document that was published. Here's all the names they mentioned. I'll show you guys one of those if it's interesting to you. But notice how they started. 1963, the Muslim Student Association. All right, so if I go back to the model I just explained, it starts on that first step of educational indoctrination. And their objective was say, let's start it with the Muslim Student Association. If any of you have children or yourselves have learned or teach on college campuses, the MSA is still very active today. Okay. A lot of people in the United States believe that Students for Justice in Palestine, something called SJP, is more radical. But I also have news for you. Almost every Muslim Brotherhood faction starts in one way and branches off to become more radical. And so it's not unusual for us to see that even organizations can branch off and become more radical. So if I skip you forward, let's look at those organizations. So somebody asked right before we started the call if we're going to talk about documents that have been released. So what I can tell you is there's been at least one very large case against the Muslim Brotherhood factions in the United States, and that was called the Holy Land Foundation trial. It's the largest counterterrorism, financial terrorism case that's ever happened in the United States. And it exposed a financing network of Hamas in the United States. Now, Hamas receives its guidance from the Muslim Brotherhood, as do many other terrorist organizations. And so there was this exposure all of a sudden of all of these documents that were found by the FBI inside of the house of one of the Muslim Brotherhood directors. And essentially, the organizations that you're looking at on the screen here were listed inside that document. I actually think I might. Let me switch over to this one. Here you go. That's actually a copy of that document. It's known as the 1991 Memorandum. And essentially, it was a document written in Arabic, translated here into English, that says this is the strategic goal for the Muslim Brotherhood in North America. And this document defined how they were going to infiltrate the political system, the economy, society, and academia to take their powerful hold inside of the United States. For some people, you would recognize this as the plan to take down democracy without firing a shot. That's kind of the terminology around it. And these were the organizations that were mentioned on the last page of that document. So if any of you that are joining us from the US are familiar with some of these names, this is definitely, I would say, a third indication that you know that in your community, you do have organizations that abide by the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. And so when we do information mapping, because we're trying to essentially provide a very accurate picture. All right, the picture's already bad enough. Nobody needs to make anything up. We really try to provide a very accurate picture. So we try to say from these organizations that are mentioned here, and now I'm going to take you back to where we were.
Those are organizations that were mentioned from documents from 1991. That's correct. Also proliferated since then.
Okay, so this is what we call the 1991 document, right? And so this is the 1991 group. So everyone that you see on the board here is who's listed in that paper that I just showed you, that document. If it's in red, it is an organization that was designated as a terrorist organization by the US government. The only one here in red is what was the Holy Land Foundation. If it's in gray, it has deactivated itself or it was defunct by an agency. If it's blue, it's a company. And if it's yellow, it is an organization still active today.
Nonprofit.
Yes, and so that's a regular charity or something of the effect of a 501c3 or 501c4, if that means anything to the viewers in the States. But essentially, you still have a very large network of the original Muslim Brotherhood organizations that have already gone down in one terror financing case. But really, beyond that, the case stopped in 2000 or after 2004. And so there's a big question today on what's going to happen with this as the United States administration and other state-led governments are realizing that there really is a very big growing threat. And why wasn't it stopped back in the early 2000s when it was uncovered? But my bigger question is, are they going to stop it now? And so we try to assist in visualizing all of that information that the Muslim Brotherhood gave us themselves on, what's the difference between all of you and how did it start? So we decided to map this in a different way where it showed us which states they started in. And so the first one, and where the MSA was created, was in Indiana. Really? And now we know that most of that activity of the original foundation is in Indiana. But I said, well, not only location-wise, what about the people that started it? So these three gentlemen, all of them originally from Iraq, are the founders of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. not only in the United States, but essentially they created it through creating the Muslim Student Association. But before they arrived in the United States, they did a pit stop. I do believe we have one person that you mentioned joining from the UK. So I guess this is
at least one, yeah.
At least one. So those three gentlemen first left Iraq on a scholarship because, again, the Muslim Brotherhood is a scholars. Okay, imagine it like a fraternity in the sense. They created the Muslim Student Association in the United Kingdom, and then the umbrella organization for student Islamic organizations in Europe. And then they said, okay, we're going to continue on and we're going to do a master's. We're going to get that scholarship and go to the US. There, we're going to create the MSA. And then we're going to start creating all these other organizations that are going to support the work of the MSA. But interesting, it's not always what people assume. You see, like I said, you have to look at it as escalation. The Muslim Student Association served as a recruiting ground for the Muslim Brotherhood, potentially still does. And essentially, find your best students, get them to join together, create initiatives that are then going to create all of the organizations that fit your ideology and indoctrination. They started creating organizations out of the MSA. And so the best and brightest started creating all of these organizations that are very prominent and successful. And just like any good fraternity, I mean, guys, let's be honest, right? If any of you are part of a fraternity, you know a few simple rules about your fraternity. One, it's a brotherhood. Shocking how the name became Muslim Brotherhood. Second, you guys stick together. You're a network. If you need something, you have your brothers. All right. It's the same in sororities. You need something, you call your sisters. All of you have either a WhatsApp group or a mail chain or something where it keeps you together. I would say that the Muslim Brotherhood just does this better than all of us. And when I say better than all of us, I really do mean, if I zoom out for a second, they have replicated.
They're not hazing one another. They're hazing us.
Absolutely. Well, they've also replicated this in every country that they've gone to. And they've even done it with some very famous people of today.
Wow.
And so when you realize, now I'm going to come back to you guys to kind of talk directly. When you realize the size of the network and the type of people and power that you're dealing with, you realize that preventative intelligence might be already a little too late, right? We actually now just have to accept that we have to view this network for what it is, the power that they have, the resources. And sometimes, like I said, you have to realize that they've had billions of dollars and decades head start on any of us before we really realized how severe this could get.
So I have a number of questions, and I see a lot of other people here too. I'm going to try and jump to those. But when I was a student, I was much more naive than I am. I was at Emory in the 1980s, and I realized that we didn't have a major anti-Israel problem on campus like many campuses already did back then. So I decided to be proactive and befriend the head of the Moslem Student Association, who was a medical student from Syria. Um, Ridiculously radical. We were cordial. Never saw eye to eye on a thing. But I thought that somehow in my naive little 1980s Jonathan mind that by humanizing Israel and the Jewish people, they wouldn't want to kill us or do other damage to us. Now, in looking what you're showing us, since before I'm born, the Muslim Student Association has been indoctrinating and using its role as a vehicle, as a farm system, right, for future Muslim Brotherhood leaders. Was I completely naive in thinking that maybe that was Ahmed part of a plot, or did he simply just join this institution because there was no other Islamic organization at Emory University at the time?
I'll answer you quickly in two ways. One will be my answer, and another will be someone who came out of the Islamist networks of the UK.
Okay.
My answer is, first of all, you'd be shocked to know that Emory today is a hotbed for this for this network. Strangely enough, I don't know what years you were at Emory, but the professor that is the supervisor of the MSA has been there since about 86, I believe. Came straight out of the Middle East, had a little pit stop on the way, and then set up at Emory. Today, Emory, the student organizations, mobilized some of the most radicalized and extreme student protests in that region of the country.
Wow.
So specifically, you went to one of the hardcore ones. But to say that you were naive, listen, I think that we all are. And I learned that from a former Muslim Brotherhood, Muslim Student Association member in the UK. He wrote a book about this. And he essentially said, there is no innocent Brotherhood member. They all know what they're doing. They all know that what the agenda is. They all abide by, they have this specific rite of passage in the sense where their right as an Islamist is to lie to you, is to misguide you, and it is to lead you on to believe that you're going to be fine. But I'll also say, Jewish students have a feeling like this is all about them. And I have bad news for the Jews on this call. It's not about you. I know that we love for it all to be about us all the time. It's not about you. You're a stepping stone along the way. But they're not going to stop at making the Jewish students feel uncomfortable and pushing you aside. That's just what they're already allowed to do. When they're given the order to then do that to the Christian students as well, is when the rest of the campus will feel the same way that the Jewish kids feel today.
Okay. A lot of people want to know, Emily, and you alluded to it, and as you were giving that very, very comprehensive overview of the timeline and just a flavor, I feel like we're at a tasting menu of just some of the Muslim Brotherhood organizations. Um, you alluded to the question, okay, before, well, why has it not already been stopped? Why was it not prevented? Why has it not been? It's more than 3 decades since
Yeah.
4 decades almost, right? However long. I'm
60s,
so
yeah.
old I can't do my math since 1991, but it's been a long time. I realized as we were speaking, the last time we talked face to face was not in January at Olga's Memorial. It was when we bumped into each other at a conference in Nashville more recently. And you had just come from a meeting, I won't say with whom, not my place, but you can talk about who you meet with and what their responses are. But I'm curious when people are asking why has there not been a solution when you're presenting this information to government leaders at statewide, federal, or other people of influence, what's their response?
Mostly shock. You asked me an honest question. I'll give you an honest answer. So yes, we do help advise some very senior government entities and individuals. The first immediate response is kind of it's shock, and then it's anger. It's almost like you have to go through the stages of grief when you hear this information and you're faced with it. You have to you get angry because you're like, how did someone not stop this? Who else knows about this? And then immediately you can tell the ones that want to stop it, because the first question that they'll actually ask me is, who needs to stop this? Like, who is the entity that then stops this? Now,
Right.
here's the
That's
hard part. The reason that we focus as a company on the bottom 3 steps of the escalator is because when you do go to the way that Western democracies are built today, your different security apparatuses and agencies are not tasked or mandated to deal with this threat. They're tasked to deal with life and death. They're tasked to deal with terrorism that's active already. They're tasked to deal with, bombs on the street or shootings or things that cause harm to individuals physically. For the Western governments to now move their psyche into a place where they're going to have to recognize that, wait a second, we also have to stop the beginning of that escalator before it escalates to all of these acts of terrorism. It's actually very difficult for people to comprehend. And so you do have to kind of maneuver until you find the right places. And what we have found successful over the years in dealing with this is exactly that, is using the systems that the opposing side believes that they can manipulate. So that's the legal system. It's the media sometimes. It's legislation. Okay, so we'll provide this information, then we'll say, this is where they're breaking the law. Okay, this is where you can actually go after them and say, hey, this is not okay. This is where legislation can be enforced, or new legislation needs to be written to handle this issue. Today, we see that happening in California and Florida. So I don't know if we have anyone from those, not California, Texas and Florida. I wish California.
Someone just asked about Texas in the questions, yeah.
And so Texas and Florida were presented with this information, not only by us, but I've had the privilege over the past decade of working with some of the most phenomenal NGOs that work on this topic, from monitoring their media to providing legislative policy recommendations to governments. Our role in all of that is essentially, here's the information, here's the picture. Now, who can help deal with it? And so Texas and Florida were presented this information, and they're acting on it, right? Both governors said, no, this is not going to be allowed in our state. And so now what do they do to begin doing that? They create task forces, they implement new policy. They're really standing up for their citizens. And we hope that we're going to see more states stand up for their citizens the same way. But it'll be a long process.
Does it need to be statewide or federal or a combination of the two? Where's this, I guess pun intended, where's the silver bullet?
I find working with national government to be kind of like trying to turn around an aircraft carrier. It takes a little while. Effective, and it'll in the end it will be the delivering blow. However, state level you can do things much faster. City level you can do it even faster. And so it really all depends on how fast a decision maker wants to operate. So we do recommend that every state take action. We're always available, and we've had the honor of working with a number of states, the same that we do with European countries. Our role is to come in and say, let us map this for you. Let us show you what this looks like, and then you make your own decision on whether you feel that is okay and abiding by your state values, and of course the American Constitution. Right, implementing a Sharia court or a Sharia finance or Sharia education is not always in line with the American Constitution. And so that's where we kind of provide that information. And then decision makers and agencies need to make their own decisions on how they act upon it.
So you're not a lobby, you're not advocating, you have an agenda, but you're not there telling them what to do and how to do it. You're presenting the facts and helping guide them in something that's a complete clean slate for them because they don't know, it's never been done before, and helping them figure out what they can do, whether it's federal, state, or city agenda. Yeah.
Right. And so just like most, it's human nature. All of us on this call have probably experienced something in our lifetime where we kind of question, was that okay? Was it illegal? What happened to me? Or was it just immoral? Or where does that line drawn? And the most interesting thing is we normally don't know until we research it, until we actually check those facts. And so I decided a very long time ago that I was going to choose to have more faith in humanity than probably your average investigative intelligence analyst. And I was going to say, no, I actually believe that if people can just collect the information and absorb, you guys just absorbed a huge amount of information in just a few minutes, right? So I said, can we visualize all of this information in a way that nobody actually needed to read hundreds and hundreds of pages to become an expert on this topic and still understand what's facing them? And if they then take that information in and look at it, can I have faith in humanity that they'll do something about it to protect the people that elected them to do that? And so I do have probably more faith in elected officials than your average person, but I think I kind of have to.
Yeah, you do have to. But as you're saying that, it kind of the democratic system, and you and I are both Americans, whether it's every 2 or every 4 or 6 years, depending on what we're voting for, you have a potential turnover. So you might make really good inroads with a particular political leader who might not be in office or might not have that as the priority because his or her party is leaning in a different direction. How do you combat that? Democracy.
I fortunately have been blessed that I have not had to deal with this issue yet.
Okay.
I probably work in one of the last remaining bipartisan issues on the table. And I acknowledge that almost every day. I think, especially in the United States, you know what? I would say maybe even in multiple countries that I've worked in, when anyone on the spectrum is still an honest patriot of their country, and they see that they have some sort of an infiltration that's already in their country, trying to change and morph it from within to the point where it will no longer be a free democratic country, you can't help but your skin kind of gets uncomfortable. I was on a call today where you would expect a lot of backlash to some of the things I talk about. And they were like, well, this is disturbing. So I think I'm pretty fortunate that the Muslim Brotherhood's done a pretty good job explaining their agenda well enough themselves. Like I said, the picture's already pretty bad. You don't actually have to paint it Hollywoody. You can take their own documents, their own names, their own lectures, right? How many times have anyone on this call seen a video script of lessons being taught today inside of radicalized Muslim Brotherhood affiliated mosques? And they're saying that, that Jews are pigs and swine, and Christians are, to be beaten if they don't hide behind the tree, and all sorts of weird things that are coming out today. lines that if you gave it to them and you asked them, was this the Nazi Party or was this, a fringe group of Michigan, nobody would assume that it wasn't the Nazis. And so I think that in the end of the day, when you actually just present them for what they claim to be, the average patriot on any form of that spectrum, whether you agree with all of their politics or not, just kind of says, no, 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 this isn't going to happen here.
And the things that you're finding are all open source.
Mhm.
You could dig deeper, certainly, and find things that they're hiding, but in a sense, you don't really need to, huh?
I don't need to. And if agencies that have those abilities and those rights decide to, great. Unfortunately, that's never something that comes back to me, right? I never quite know the full impact of our work
Okay.
until maybe a designation happens, right? So this year we've had a lot of designations happen. We've had the U.S. has designated the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, in Lebanon, in Jordan, and most recently in Sudan. And hopefully
As
there's more to come
terrorists.
as terrorist organizations.
So
And
I was
so,
gonna, yeah, go ahead.
so anyone associated with those arms of the Muslim Brotherhood essentially are then designated as terrorists. So that's one very big step in the right direction. Is it a full step? No. Like, do I wish that the entire Muslim Brotherhood in all of the countries around the world and all of the states across the United States would be designated? Of course. But we have to work hard to get there. We have to be able to prove that case, and we have to rely on the systems in place to do that.
So I want to try to remember to come back to the second question I have on that. But the first question is when this White House issued the executive order in the last quarter of 2025 to designate such and such organizations as terrorist organizations, notably excluded were states such as Qatar and Turkey, which are supposedly allies of the United States, with Turkey getting an honorable mention not only as an ally but also as a member of NATO. How problematic are those? And the fact that President Trump keeps talking about what great people they are and the important alliance that we have.
Yeah, great question. This is one of the struggles that we'll face, and I just call it, the consequences of reality. Obviously, there's a lot of bureaucracy and there's a lot of politics to these types of things. I can guarantee you that everything is looked at. The timeline in which that's going to happen, it might be this administration, it might be a new administration. I think that it's upon the shoulders of all of us fighting this fight to not give up, even if the decision is in this administration not to designate those. From my seat, all I can say is I'm constantly looking for what is the overwhelming evidence, right? Those silver bullets that we can bring to the table. I do think that when you see the full spectrum of how many dangerous countries there are, there's a lot. And I saw that it was mentioned in the topic some as well. Qatar has become quieter about their involvement in the Muslim Brotherhood since just about a year and a half ago. Maybe they're feeling the pressure. Maybe they're feeling the heat. Maybe, this is all speculation. I'm just playing with you now. Yes, this is nothing that I know.
Okay, okay.
Maybe the administration was like, "Hey guys, don't do that. We want to come closer to you guys. You do me a favor, I'll do you a favor," and that's politics, right? That really is politics. Whereas Jordan and Egypt have already designated the Muslim Brotherhood. So it's also just naturally easier to designate those because you have a partner, right? You have a partner that's of that government that's already designated them. And so I think that there are going to be more designations to come. We see that on the state level and the national level or international level. And as we move forward, that 1991 document that was asked about and that I showed, it defined not only the organizations, but it defined their 12 departments of operation. I call them the 12 arms of the Muslim Brotherhood. And as long as we start understanding more about those 12 arms of operation, and I know we don't have time tonight, but I'm happy to do another segment in the future on what are
Okay.
those 12 arms and how they operate. But once we understand where that goes and how far that infiltrates into our society, I think we'll start seeing more consequences coming down on them, whether it's a Republican or a Democratic state.
Okay, good. I'm glad you offered because I would like to take you up on that as part two. I have many more questions, and I know many people who are watching live also have questions. I want to run through mine and then give other people a shout out. So we spoke about, I mentioned Qatar and Turkey, but but it's funny. There are many elements here that if anyone were accusing Israel of apartheid, which again, that was a great way that only Olga could address that the way she did. But the fact that not only are there Arabs in every sector of Israeli society, but we have a political party that not only is part of the Knesset, but has been part of the government and is affiliated or was affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood. How sitting here in Israel, what do we need to do? I know that Mansour Abbas made a declaration a few months ago, maybe when around this was happening, that he disassociated from the Muslim Brotherhood. But to me, that just feels like whack-a-mole. That he said, never, we're not. But he didn't change his ideology. He just might not have paid his annual membership dues.
Um, the absolute pain in my side. I am a dual citizen. My companies are based in Israel, in the US, and in the UK. And yet, in both of my core countries, the Muslim Brotherhood is not designated properly as a terrorist organization. I think it is a huge mistake on both of their parts. I'm not going to excuse either one of them. I work diligently with organizations to work on showing the Israeli government, you guys also have to take the first step in that. You need to designate. You need to be able to say this is not going to be tolerated, like our Middle Eastern neighbors have. And then I think that we'll see more following suit. Austria was the first European nation to do it in 2022 or 2020. Recently they've done that, right? It always takes like that first one that needs to begin the process.
Okay, good. Emily, I got one question that I know other people are asking. What can average people do? People have asked that in the Q&A right now, but this was a common question that many people asked leading up to the conversation today. And
Mm-hmm.
you've got people from all over the world who asked the question, we have changed policies, changed governments. I'm encouraged to hear you say that this is indeed a nonpartisan issue, and that's like a U.S. term. But what can an average person who's following today do, and how to help keep the heat on?
I would say demand and encourage transparency in your communities. You can demand from your elected officials, or you can help mobilize information like ours to those officials and to say, hey, we actually want it to be aware of what's going on. I think the biggest problem is that people just kind of avoid it because you don't want the conflict. But if you avoid it, it's still going to come for you. And so as just average citizens, the best you can do is say, hey, wait a second, no, this is something I want to know. What does this network look like in my community, in my children's schooling system, in inside of my place of what governs my daily life? And you'd be shocked that I think that your politicians, your elected officials, they would actually like to see that because they want to know if this is important to you or if it's not. Because if they decide to take on that fight, it's their neck on the line. But they need to know that the people that they govern want that.
Got it. Okay. So the people that we're talking about, I want to scroll through quickly some of the questions and the people are asking live and begin to wrap up. Forgive me, everybody. There are a lot of great statements here too. I'm not going to do those. I really want to provoke Emily on questions that we haven't already addressed. Gary's asking a question that seems to be to everybody. Most Americans have no awareness of the Holy Land Foundation prosecution and the Muslim Brotherhood Foundation, quote unquote, the project document seized in the raid on Switzerland a few years later. At some time point during the call, can you please ask participants if they are or are not aware of these? So participants, I'm inviting you to answer Gary's question in the Q&A, but while you do, Emily, do you have any sense of whether, I mean, you're not talking about average people, you're talking about elected officials. Are they aware of these?
No.
Okay.
The unfortunate answer is no. That's why people like me exist. We have to take these documents that have been out for decades around the world and make sure that the right people read them.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Here's a question from Claire. When Christians and Jews practice their faith in a devout, faithful, obedient way, we do not call them extremist or radical or Jewish or Christianist. So why do we call devout, practicing, obedient Muslims Islamists? Good question.
And so I would say that if they're devout practicing Muslims, that's fine. I don't think that's what we call Islamists. Islamists are essentially a sect within that religion that believes that their governing system of social, economic, political, and academic ways should control you. That's what's considered radicalized. So for instance, if a Jewish group decided that they were not going to have capacity or tolerance for any other form of education, academia, and governing system, we'd call them extreme too.
So a complimentary question from David. Are my Muslim neighbors sympathetic to Islamists? Do they prefer to live under Sharia law versus constitutional law?
I don't know your neighbors, so I don't know. But
On
you should,
average.
on average, there is a statistic that many people go by that something between 10 to 20% of Muslims are Islamists. I don't have any information that would back that up. However, I will say that is a huge population of the Muslim community that has suffered at the hand of the Islamists. Point in case, the Arab and Muslim nations have outcast them and decided that they're terrorist organizations. So, no, I don't think that it's so clear cut. And I think that a lot of Muslims who have suffered at the hand of Islamists could tell you quite a lot about that.
Okay, thank you. There's some great statements here, and you know what? If, with your permission, and if Zoom allows me to do this, everybody, I'm going to put the statements in a subsequent email and maybe put it in the show notes or certainly the YouTube and send it to all of those who have registered for this. And if anyone's following this conversation and didn't even know they had a chance to join live, be in touch at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com and we'll get them to you. Let me just continue to quickly try and scroll through. Andrew asked the question also about what can I as an individual do to address this issue. Forgive me, Andrew, I'm not going to read the rest because I think Emily already addressed it. Get to the basics. Islam commands killing Jews and Christians. That's the agenda. Either we kill them or they will kill us. Emily, do you wish to comment on that?
Oh, I saw that comment come across. Listen, when it comes to Islamists and in specific regions of the world, yes, you're right, because they're already on that top escalator. It really is a fight for life. Our hope is that we can prevent the escalation getting to the point where people like that are in power and can make those decisions.
Excellent. Andrew is asking a good question. Can you suggest any books that are relevant to your research and information about this, the development and growth of the Brotherhood?
Tons. As Jonathan knows, we have a library here in the office of all this material. Jonathan, I'm happy to send a list over for you to send out to
Great.
the.
Amazing. So thank you for that. I guess I'll have to pick up some books at Barnes and Noble next time I'm in America. Scrolling through, yes, we will make the video available for everybody along with Emily's list. Thank Frank Gaffney had me on his show a while ago as an excellent podcaster exposing Sharia. Um, to the point
Great
that
source of
city
information for this material, Frank Gaffney.
Yeah. Okay, good. Maybe we'll reach out to him and get him back with you. That would be cool. To point to that cities can move faster, the inverse of that is likely also true. Wow, good question, Daniel. So a guy like Mamdani and the public outdoor prayer demonstrations that Christians could likely not get away with, is he more of a Muslim, Islamist, or to be determined?
Mamdani.
Yeah.
I would say that his actions fall in line directly with the Red Green Alliance, and therefore I would define him as extreme.
And does he? So I thought Daniel was going to go in a different direction with the question. If a city can act relatively easily to ban aspects of the Brotherhood, does he have a greater influence as mayor of the largest city of New York of the United States to provide fertile ground for it?
That's essentially their modus operandum. That's what they're trying to
That's
achieve.
it. That's it. So not like my friend Ahmed in college, who I just thought was a nice medical student, but in fact with an agenda. I've always wondered what happened to Ahmed. Gary is thanking you for the information. Claire, is this a question? No. 12 arms. Oh, that's interesting, Stephen. I'm gonna let Emily answer this. The 12 arms just happens to dovetail with the 12er beliefs. Is there any correlation to that, Emily?
That's a good question. I've been asked that question before. My answer is I actually don't know if that was their intention, because the Muslim Student Association essentially first claimed that it was an organization to bridge between Sunni and Shia towards the ideology of a Muslim caliphate that would be unified. The 12er doesn't always sit within that scope, but it's an interesting theological question for Islamist groups that I'd love to get an answer to.
Okay, cool. That's a great question. Thank you. Last question I'm going to take from the crowd here. Emily, you've addressed the concept of Red Green Alliance. Stephen's asking specifically if you can discuss the combination of Islam and communism, what that means, maybe a little bit more in detail.
Absolutely. I'll try to do it briefly. That in itself is a whole nother conversation. But essentially, it's an age-old relationship of an alliance between Marxist/communist and Islamist factions. You saw it during World War II between the Nazis and the Muslim Brotherhood, and you still see it today between communist or socialist movements and the Muslim Brotherhood arms or the Islamist arms inside of the United States. So, for example, you might go to what does that relationship look like? They help fund each other. They help march together. They help get each other out of jail. There's a whole slew of operations that they do able to support each other. And then collectively, if they're able to take over, they both win because the green side, the Islamist side, essentially wants power, domination, and that front row seat to govern. The red side, the Marxist communist side, just wants the economy. And that's always been the age-old relationship between them is you help me control the economy and they control the finances that support it and they control the governing system.
Okay, more on that. That'll be part of our follow-up. Before I invite Arlene Samuels to join, and Arlene, feel free to please turn on your camera if you like to close us in prayer. So, Emily, as friends now, we've known each other a year and a half in person. Um, I hesitated even to have you do this with me. We've spoken about this over the months. You haven't necessarily always wanted to be public, and now you're in a place that you're very public. But I hesitated because I didn't want to do anything that might potentially compromise your own safety and well-being. Do you think of that? Are you, now that you are in the public eye, and I don't mean because you're on inspiration from Zion, how are you approaching that in your life?
In fact, you're probably going to close in prayer. I'll say prayer would be useful for that topic.
Prayer would be useful. You got that, Arlene?
I do believe that at some point, everyone that leads this type of initiative has to make a decision of what is our personal responsibility and how far does that go. I remember very vividly receiving my first fatwa, an Islamic death threat. It's not pleasant. However, I do also think that maybe it puts all of us in a specific category where if I named the company Valop for Valor Operations for a reason, I need to stand behind that. And that was my decision to become more public about what we do in hopes that it would inspire communities and countries to know that there is a solution to this and they can access this type of information and ability to move forward. And so if the desire to stay in the shadows because I work better that way is now no longer an option, at least I'll do it with a lot of conviction and support from people who believe in what we do.
Okay, thank you for that. It is a concern, and with that, and as Emily correctly said, I'm really thrilled to invite my friend Arlene Samuels, joining from Atlanta, to close us in prayer. Arlene, as Emily's speaking, I kind of imagine myself sitting in the chair next to you, thinking about what you must be thinking about this conversation. So I'm really excited that you're here, that you're joining us, and would love it if you would close us with some really inspired prayers. I know you will.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Jonathan, can you hear me, please?
Yes, we do.
Okay, wonderful. It's a privilege for me to be here and to join in this extremely important conversation. So let us go before God in prayer. God, our Father, first of all, I want to thank you that you are sovereign. You have your plans. You have your power, which we simply cannot understand, but we are grateful that we know that you have it. And God, I want to thank you first for Jonathan and others like him who are prolific in their messages and in their reach. And this is so important. And God, you know that I personally pray for Jonathan and his family. And God, I am so thankful, and I'm sure I must speak now for everyone who has had the privilege of listening to Emily. She is a new person to me, and I thank you for her. God, you have given her talents, giftings, brilliance, and God, at this time, when we are dealing with civilizational issues, We want to lift up the Judeo-Christian civilization because we are now faced with one which is not of your design. So, God, I want to ask specifically for Jonathan, for Emily, for everyone here on this very important webinar, that you would provide us with the bravery and the courage that we need for such a time as this. It is a big step to speak out because we are very aware of the kinds of hatred that can come toward us as Jews, as Christians, and certainly as Arab friends who understand the situation and have their very, very sincere concerns as well. God, we know again that because you are sovereign, everything will come into the right schedule, the right actions. And I want to make sure that all of us understand that you have a love for us and a purpose for the time we are living in. I, frankly, at my age, am quite astonished that I live in such a season as this. And I pray, as my husband and I pray, that we will follow what you have given us to do at this time in 2026 and going forward. I pray this for each of us, that we will lock into what you are purposing us for. Again, God, I thank you so much for this extremely valuable briefing that I have received, and I know that everyone on the call is receiving. And God, I ask for your special protection over Emily, because it sounds as if she is stepping out from the shadows. And God, we're asking for your light and your favor and your graciousness from the Aaronic blessing, that you will be gracious to her, that your light will shine upon her, that you will give her shalom in every situation, every conversation, every article that she is engaged in, that you would raise her profile, but yet raise her safety in every situation where you want her to make a step. Thank you for the blessings of freedom that you give us in the United States of America, our greatest ally, Israel, the spiritual homeland for those of us who are Christians. God, we ask for a special blessing for Jonathan as he is in Israel and his family members are serving in and out of the IDF. And God, I thank you for protecting them thus far. And we ask for your special protections upon the people in northern Israel. And God, I really want to ask for your wisdom, that you would input into the mind of our president, that he would act upon your wisdom that you share with him, and that he will understand it in that way. Thank you again, God, for all of your blessings. Amen.
Man, thank you so much, Arlene, Emily. This has been so incredibly enlightening and engaging,
Yes.
and I will look forward to doing it again. And hopefully, the round two won't take as long as round one. So I'll look forward to scheduling that. And I just wanted one more announcement for those of you who have followed, who joined, or are listening afterward. Those of you who are following live are gonna get an email from me probably tomorrow with the video link and what have you. There have been so many great questions, so many great comments here. It's impossible to address all of them. If Zoom doesn't give me the text of all of your messages, I invite you to respond to me and send me those. I would actually like to compile them for future conversation. Emily, keep up the amazing work. Thank you for what you're
Yes.
doing, and thank you for taking time to join us today.
Thank you for
It's
having
been a
me.
real delight. Yeah, and I just want to, as the last thanks go today to our sponsors, our dear friend Priscilla Flory and the Coin family for their friendship and meaningful sponsorship. Always inspiration from Zion, and all of the Genesis 123 Foundation programs are made possible by donations. So please consider being part of what we're doing, helping us to continue the dialogue and build bridges. As I mentioned at the outset, which I rarely do, this episode is in memory, loving memory and respect of our dear friend Olga Meshwe Washington, who we so much wish were here with us, but she's so much still a part of us. And for those of you who never knew her, you lost out, because she still has a radical presence in our lives. If you'd like to sponsor a future episode or in honor or memory of a loved one or special occasion, please be in touch at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com. And we'd always like to hear your comments as part of a dialogue, especially questions for our Ask the Rabbi programs. So please be in touch on that. Please share this conversation with others who will also find it of interest, and continue to join us right here, where we bring you more meaningful topics about Israel that you won't hear anywhere else. Wherever you are in the world, I pray that you and your loved ones are all safe and healthy, and I send my blessings from right here in the Judean mountains. God bless you.